I didn't notice him at first. Or rather, I refused to acknowledge the feeling that something was off. It started as a nagging sensation, like being watched, but never catching the eyes that did the watching. I brushed it off as paranoia, an overactive imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. My wife, Linette, had changed. It was subtle at first, shifts in her routine, unexplained absences, a new hesitation in her voice when I asked where she had been. I told myself I was being insecure. After all, we had been together for 9 years. She wasn't the type to stray. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But then I saw him. A man, standing across the street from my office, just beyond the line of parked cars. At first, I thought he was just another pedestrian waiting for a cab, but he wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at me. Or more accurately, watching me. For months, I noticed him in different places. Sometimes outside my gym, other times near the coffee shop I stopped at before work. Always at a distance, never speaking, never making a move. Just observing. And Linette, her behavior only grew stranger. She started locking her phone. The late nights at work became more frequent. She smelled different, like cologne that wasn't mine. I confronted her once, casually, as if I were joking. "You've got a secret admirer or something?" She just laughed, kissed my cheek, and changed the subject. I let it slide, but my gut told me otherwise. One evening, after weeks of seeing the same man lurking in my periphery, I finally decided to make the first move. I walked straight toward him. He didn't flinch, didn't try to walk away. He just stood there, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You got a problem?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He didn't answer at first, just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read, somewhere between amusement and pity. And then he spoke. "You don't know, do you?" That was the moment my world started to crack. His words sent a chill through me. "You don't know, do you?" I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. This man, whoever he was, had been watching me for months. He had been lurking at the edges of my life, just out of reach, never speaking. And now, after all this time, those were the first words he said? I wasn't about to let him get under my skin. "What the hell are you talking about?" I shot back, keeping my voice steady, even as my stomach twisted into knots. The man tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was some puzzle he was piecing together. Up close, I could see him better. Dark hair, lean build, dressed just well enough to blend in, but not enough to stand out. The kind of guy who could disappear in a crowd the second you looked away. "Linette," he said. Just her name. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What about her?" I demanded. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You should ask her yourself." I wanted to grab him, shake him until he gave me a real answer. But I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. He wasn't afraid of me. He was toying with me, and I hated it. But more than that, I hated that small, sinking feeling in my gut. The one that told me I already knew what he was trying to say. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "If you have something to say, say it." His smirk faded. "She's been lying to you." My body locked up, my breath catching in my throat. Lying. That word rang in my ears like an alarm bell. Of course, I'd had my suspicions. The late nights. The changes in her routine. The way she always seemed just a little too distracted when I spoke to her. But hearing it from someone else, some stranger who had been following me, made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, my voice quieter now, but harder. For the first time, something flickered in his expression, hesitation. He looked like he was weighing his words, deciding how much to say. And then, finally, "My name is Porter." Porter. The name meant nothing to me. I had never heard it before. But the way he said it, like it should mean something, made my skin crawl. I shook my head. "What do you want?" He let out a quiet sigh, glancing past me, like he was checking to see if anyone was listening. Then he leaned in just slightly and said something that turned my world upside down. "She's not just lying to you," he said. "She's lying to him, too." I blinked. "Who?" Porter met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something that almost looked like pity. "The guy she's been seeing behind your back." Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're wrong." Porter gave a slow, almost sad nod. "I wish I was. I don't remember walking away. I don't remember how I got home. All I remember is the pounding of my heart in my ears and the cold, creeping dread that settled in my bones. When I stepped inside, the house was dark. Linette wasn't home. Of course, she wasn't. I stood in the silence, staring at nothing, trying to convince myself that I didn't just hear what I heard. That it wasn't real. That this man, this stranger, was just messing with me. But deep down, I already knew the truth. And I knew that the next time I looked into my wife's eyes, I wouldn't see her the same way ever again. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp outside. I wasn't sure how long I had been sitting there, but time didn't seem real at that moment. Porter's words looped in my mind like a broken record, each repetition hitting harder than the last. She's lying to him, too. I didn't want to believe him. I couldn't believe him. Linette and I had been together for almost a decade. We had history. We had love. We had stability. Or at least, I had convinced myself we did. But something deep inside me, the same gut feeling I had been ignoring for months, was screaming that Porter was telling the truth. Then, as if summoned by my thoughts, my phone buzzed. I almost jumped, my nerves already frayed. I pulled it out of my pocket, my heart hammering in my chest as I saw Linette's name on the screen. Linette, hey babe, running late at work. Don't wait up for me. Love you. I stared at the message, my fingers tightening around the phone. A cold anger twisted in my stomach. Liar. I knew where she really was. Or at least, I knew what she was really doing. The only question now was, who was the other man? And why was Porter watching both of us? I needed answers. I forced myself to breathe, to stay calm. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. If Porter was telling the truth, I couldn't let emotions drive me into making a mistake. That's when an idea hit me. Linette's laptop. She always left it at home. She had a work laptop, so this one was personal. And if she was having an affair, there was no way she was using her phone for all her communication. She wasn't stupid. But her laptop? That was a different story. I stood up, my body feeling almost disconnected from my mind as I walked to the bedroom. Sure enough, her sleek silver laptop was sitting on the nightstand, untouched, like it always was. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I opened it. I knew her password. She had never changed it. The moment I typed it in, the screen unlocked, revealing her desktop. My eyes scanned the folders, the emails, the messages. At first, nothing stood out. Just the usual, work files, old pictures, shopping receipts. But then, something caught my eye, a folder buried deep in her documents, labeled with a single letter. R. My stomach twisted. I clicked on it. And that's when my world fell apart. Inside the folder were dozens of pictures, messages, and videos. Some were screenshots of chats, others were saved emails. But the worst were the pictures. Pictures of Linette. And not just pictures of her, but of her with him. A man I had never seen before. My breath caught in my throat as I clicked through the images. Some were innocent, pictures of them sitting in a restaurant, walking through a park. But others made my blood run cold. There were pictures of them together in a hotel room. Linette sitting on his lap, smiling at him the way she used to smile at me. A picture of them in bed, partially covered by sheets. A picture of her kissing him. A video thumbnail that I didn't dare click. I felt sick. My hands clenched into fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. She had lied. Over and over again. And she had been careful. So careful. She had hidden it well. But she had slipped up. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to focus. I wasn't done. I needed to know more. I opened her messages, scrolling through her chat history. That's when I saw his name. Reagan. I had never heard her mention a Reagan before. He wasn't one of our friends. He wasn't a coworker, as far as I knew. He was a stranger. A stranger who had somehow become the center of her world. I clicked on the chat. At first, it was nothing but sweet messages, inside jokes, little flirtations. But as I scrolled further, the messages became more intense. Linette, I can't keep pretending anymore. Being with him feels like a job. You're the only one who makes me feel alive. Reagan, then leave him. We can finally stop sneaking around. Linette, not yet. He still trusts me. And he's not suspicious. I gritted my teeth. Not suspicious? If only she knew. But the worst part came near the end of the chat history. Linette, I told him I was working late tonight. He has no idea I'm with you. Wish me luck. I'll see you soon. That message was sent just an hour ago. Rage burned through me, hot and suffocating. I had been sitting at home like a fool while she was out with him, doing God knows what. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But I forced myself to stay calm. Because now, I had proof. Now, I had leverage. I took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and stood up. My mind was racing. My next move had to be careful, calculated. I wasn't going to storm out and confront her like some jealous fool. No, I was going to play this smart. Because Linette had been lying to me for months. And now, it was my turn to lie to her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the darkness, staring at the wall, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship, trying to see it with new eyes. The way Linette smiled at me when she needed something. The way she pulled away just a little too quickly when I reached for her lately. The way she still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, like she was playing a role rather than feeling anything real. It was all a performance. And I had been the fool in the audience, watching without realizing the show wasn't for me. I had the proof now. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have called her, demanded she come home, thrown the laptop in her face, and screamed at her for betraying me. But that's what she would have expected. That's what a man in my position would normally do. And Linette, she was a planner. She was careful. She had been controlling the narrative for months, making sure I stayed blind. So I had to be smarter than her. By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. It was about turning the tables on her, making her doubt her own reality the way she had made me doubt mine. If she wanted to play games, I was about to show her that I could play them better. The first step was simple. I had to act normal. When she finally came home the next morning, slipping inside as quietly as she could, I was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone like I hadn't just uncovered the biggest betrayal of my life. She stopped when she saw me, her hand tightening around the strap of her purse. Her hair was messy, her blouse slightly wrinkled. She had changed in the car. I knew that trick well. But I wasn't going to let her know I had noticed. "Morning," I said, my tone casual, easy. "You're home early." She hesitated, just for a second. A second too long. "Yeah, work was crazy last night. I just crashed at Amber's place after." She forced a yawn, stretching her arms, faking exhaustion. "Didn't want to wake you up so late." Amber. Her best friend. The one who had no idea she was being used as an alibi. I nodded, taking another sip of coffee, keeping my expression unreadable. "Makes sense." Relief flashed in her eyes. She had expected suspicion, but I gave her none. That was my first win. As she walked past me, heading for the shower, I could feel the tension rolling off her. She thought she had fooled me again. That I was still the same clueless husband she had been stringing along all this time. But this time, I was the one with the upper hand. I waited until she was in the bathroom, the sound of running water masking any noise I made. Then I grabbed her phone from the counter. I didn't need to unlock it. I already had everything I needed from her laptop. I wasn't looking for proof. I was looking for opportunities. She had a calendar app open. A reminder popped up on the screen. Lunch with Reagan, 12:30 p.m. She wasn't even trying to hide it. She had meetings with her affair partner scheduled like dentist appointments. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't touch anything. I put the phone back exactly as it was and stepped away. She couldn't know I was onto her. Not yet. Instead, I had a different idea. I called her job while she was still in the shower. I spoke with the receptionist, keeping my voice light and friendly. "Hey, this is Linette's husband. Just wanted to check in. She said she was working late last night. I wanted to send her something special to the office." "What time did she get off?" The receptionist hesitated. "Oh, I don't think she worked late. I think she left around 6. 6? She had been gone the entire night." I swallowed down the anger rising in my throat, forcing a chuckle. "Oh, must have been the night before. Thanks for your help." I hung up before she could ask any questions. So it was confirmed. She wasn't just sneaking around, she was spending entire nights with him. And she thought she could keep this going forever. I had to be careful with my next move. I didn't want her to catch on that, I knew. Not yet. Because when the moment came, I wanted her world to crumble. I walked into the bedroom just as she stepped out of the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her, steam curling behind her like the aftermath of her sins. She gave me a small smile, the kind a wife gives her husband when she wants him to believe she still belongs to him. I smiled back. "I was thinking," I said, keeping my tone light, "we haven't had a date night in a while. How about I take you out tonight?" She blinked. "Tonight?" "Yeah, just you and me. A nice dinner. Maybe some wine. We could use it, don't you think?" For a split second, I saw hesitation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out if she could afford to say no. But she knew that refusing would look suspicious. She forced a smile. "That sounds great." And just like that, I had her exactly where I wanted her. Because while she was busy sneaking around, thinking she was still in control, I was setting the stage for the biggest twist in her carefully constructed story. She thought she had a plan, but she had no idea that mine was better. That night, I played the role of the devoted husband to perfection. The smile, the laughter, the subtle touches across the dinner table, it all came naturally. Or maybe I had spent so many years being blind to the truth that slipping back into character was second nature. Linette had no idea. She thought she was in control, that I was still wrapped around her finger. But in reality, I was watching her the way she had been watching me, analyzing every expression, every nervous flicker in her eyes. The restaurant was one of her favorites. Dim lighting, soft music, and ambience designed for intimacy. I had taken her here on our anniversary once, back when I actually believed in us. I could see the memories flickering behind her eyes as she scanned the room, a nostalgic smile on her lips. She had no idea how ironic it all was. We ordered wine. She looked at me across the table, her fingers playing with the stem of her glass. "You've been different lately," she said. I raised an eyebrow, feigning curiosity. "Different how?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Just more affectionate. You haven't been asking about my schedule as much." "It's nice." Nice? That was her takeaway? She thought I was suddenly a better husband because I had stopped questioning where she was at night? She actually preferred me blind. That realization burned, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled, taking a slow sip of my wine. Maybe I've just been reminding myself of what's important. Linette beamed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. She thought she had me back. She thought she had one. She had no idea what was coming. I let her enjoy the evening. I let her feel safe. I let her think she had successfully manipulated me into accepting whatever lie she was living. But the truth was, I had already set the next phase of my plan into motion. While Linette was getting ready for our date earlier, I had made a phone call. Not to a private investigator, not to a lawyer. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I called Reagan, the man who had been sneaking around with my wife, the man who thought he was the only one she was deceiving. He didn't answer the first time, but when I called again, he picked up. "This is Reagan." His voice was cautious, clipped. I had to be careful. If I pushed too hard, he'd hang up. If I played it wrong, I'd lose my advantage. I kept my voice calm, almost friendly. "Hey, Reagan. I think we need to talk." There was a beat of silence. "Then who is this?" I let the moment stretch, let the tension build. Then, in the smoothest voice I could manage, I said, "You know exactly who this is." Another pause. Then a slow inhale. "Look, man." "Relax," I cut him off, still keeping my tone light. "I'm not here to fight. In fact, I have something I think you'd be very interested in hearing." I could feel his hesitation through the phone. He was trying to gauge if I was dangerous, if I was going to make a scene. But when he didn't hang up, I knew I had him. "I know about you and Linette," I continued. "I know you've been seeing each other for a while. I know about the hotel rooms, the late-night meetups. I know everything." He was silent. "But here's the thing, Reagan," I said, leaning against the kitchen counter, keeping my voice steady. "You're not the only one she's been lying to." That got his attention. "What?" I almost laughed. He had no idea. "You think she's just cheating on me with you?" I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "She's been playing both of us. You might want to check her messages, Reagan. You might want to look a little closer at the night she wasn't with you." I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, sharp and uneven. He was piecing it together. "She told me she loves me," he finally said, his voice tight. I almost pitied him. Almost. "She told me the same thing," I said. "And I bet if you dig a little deeper, you'll realize she's been saying it to someone else, too." Silence. A long, heavy silence. "Then, where are you?" I checked my watch. "Taking her out to dinner. But if you're interested, she'll be home later tonight. Might be worth stopping by." Another pause. Then, his voice low and dangerous, he said, Yeah, I think I'll do that." I hung up, a satisfied smirk on my lips. Because now, the game was no longer just mine. Now he was in play too. And Linette? She had no idea that tonight, the world she had built on deception was about to come crashing down. The car ride home was quiet. Linette leaned against the passenger seat, her body relaxed, a soft smile still lingering on her lips from dinner. She thought she had won. That much was clear. In her mind, tonight had been about securing my devotion, about reinforcing the illusion that she still had control over me. But the truth? The truth was that she was driving straight into the fire. As I pulled into the driveway, I glanced at the rearview mirror. The street behind us was empty. No headlights. No sign of Reagan. He was smart. He wouldn't follow us openly. but I knew he was coming. Linette let out a content sigh, stretching as she unbuckled her seatbelt. Tonight was nice, she murmured. I nodded. Yeah, it was. I opened the door for her, watching as she stepped inside. She didn't hesitate. No lingering glances at her phone, no nervous glances toward the street. She thought she had me exactly where she wanted me. She had no idea that tonight, every move she made was leading her closer to the edge of the cliff she had built for herself. As she walked toward the bedroom, I followed. I needed to keep her occupied, make sure she wasn't checking her phone. I couldn't risk Reagan warning her before the moment was right. She sat at the edge of the bed, kicking off her heels. I feel like we haven't done this in a while, she said, glancing up at me. Just us, reconnecting. Reconnecting. I forced a smile, stepping closer, my fingers grazing her shoulder. Yeah, I said. It's good to feel close again. Her eyes softened, and she leaned into my touch. It took everything in me not to recoil. She had no shame, no guilt. She wasn't thinking about Reagan or whoever else she had wrapped around her finger. Right now, in this moment, she was perfectly comfortable in her deception. And that was what disgusted me the most. A knock at the door. Linette stiffened, her body tensing just slightly. Her eyes flickered toward the clock. It was nearly midnight. She wasn't expecting anyone. Who could that be? She asked, forcing a laugh, but I could hear the edge in her voice. I shrugged. No idea. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. Not from fear, but from anticipation. The moment had arrived. As I pulled open the door, Reagan stood on the porch. His jaw was clenched, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. His eyes flickered past me, straight toward Linette, who was now standing at the end of the hallway, her face pale. Hey, Linette, Reagan said, his voice cold. She didn't move, didn't breathe. I stepped aside. Come in. Reagan walked past me, his eyes never leaving her. Linette looked at me, her expression a mixture of confusion and dread. What's going on? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shut the door behind us, locking it. Then I turned to her. I think it's time we all had an honest conversation. She swallowed hard. I don't know what you mean. Reagan let out a sharp laugh. Oh, I think you do. I walked toward the living room, motioning for them to follow. Linette hesitated, but she knew she had no choice. She sat on the couch, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. Reagan took the armchair, his posture rigid, every muscle in his body wound tight. I stood between them. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The air was thick, suffocating. Then Reagan broke the silence. How long? He asked, his voice low. Linette's eyes darted between us. What? He leaned forward. How long have you been screwing me over? She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. I don't. Don't lie, I cut in. My voice was sharp, and she flinched. Not this time. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I could see the wheels turning in her head, scrambling for a way out, a way to twist the situation in her favor. But there was no escape this time. Reagan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward her. A text conversation. Linette's name at the top. Messages I hadn't seen before. Linette, I can't do this forever. I love you, but I have to think about my future. Reagan, you promised me you'd leave him. Linette, I will. But I need time. Reagan, you've been saying that for months. Linette inhaled sharply, her fingers clenching against her arms. Reagan's jaw tightened. I was stupid enough to believe you. I let out a humorless chuckle. Yeah, join the club. Linette turned to me now, panic creeping into her voice. Listen, I can explain. You don't have to, I interrupted. I already know everything. I've seen the pictures, the texts, the videos. Her face went ghostly white. I folded my arms across my chest. I know about Reagan. I know about the others. And I know that every word out of your mouth for the past year has been a lie. Her eyes widened. There aren't any others. Reagan scoffed. Bull shatters T. She turned to him now, her expression shifting, softening. Reagan, baby, you know I love you. You know this is real. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. I thought it was. I leaned against the wall, watching her, waiting for her next move. She let out a shaky breath, her hands gripping her knees. Okay. Fine. I messed up. I should have told you sooner. Her voice cracked, and she blinked rapidly, as if forcing herself to cry. But I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you. I let out a slow breath. You didn't want to hurt me? She turned to me now, her eyes glassy. desperate. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, I swear. I still love you. I tilted my head. You love me? Yes, she whispered. Reagan let out a bitter laugh. You just told me the same thing 2 nights ago. Linette snapped her head toward him, her face paling even further. The silence stretched. She had no way out. No more lies left to spin. Finally, she did the only thing left in her playbook. She crumbled. Tears streamed down her face, her body shaking with sobs. Please, she choked. Just please. I studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, I exhaled, pushing off the wall. You know, I said, my voice eerily calm, for months, I wondered how you did it. How you could lie so effortlessly. How you could kiss me, laugh with me, live with me, while sneaking off with someone else. Linette hiccuped, reaching for me. I stepped back. Don't. She froze. I turned to Reagan. I think we're done here. He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he nodded. Without another word, I walked to the door, opened it, and gestured for him to leave. He didn't hesitate. And then it was just us. Linette stared at me, eyes wide, lips trembling. What now? I smiled. And for the first time in months, I felt completely, undeniably free. She sat there, frozen, like a cornered animal trying to decide whether to beg or bite. Her mascara had started to smudge from the fake tears she had been forcing out, but the act wasn't working anymore. Not on me. Not on Reagan. And most importantly, not on herself. Because now, for the first time, she wasn't in control. I leaned against the wall, letting the silence hang heavy between us. Letting her feel it. No more excuses. No more distractions. Just the weight of her own choices, pressing down on her like a vice. Linette inhaled shakily. She stopped, her voice breaking, then tried again. You don't have to do this. I raised an eyebrow. Do what? Her eyes darted to the door, like she was calculating her options, trying to salvage what little she could. Destroy everything, she said. We can. No. The single word cut through the air like a blade. Sharp. Final. She flinched, her nails digging into the couch cushion. You don't even know what you're saying. You're just angry. I let out a short laugh. Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying, Linette. And for once, I'm the one telling you what's going to happen. She swallowed hard, sitting up straighter, trying to regain some semblance of composure. But I could see it, the cracks in the mask she had worn so well. The way her hands trembled slightly as she brushed her hair back. She had never expected this. She had never planned for this. I walked to the coffee table and picked up my phone. With a few taps, I pulled up the folder of evidence I had gathered. The messages. The pictures. The videos. It was all there, lined up like a confession in digital form. Proof that no amount of manipulation could erase. I turned the screen toward her. Tell me, Linette, do you still want to pretend? She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, her gaze dropped to the screen. Her lips parted, her breath hitching as the color drained from her face. No, she whispered. I lowered the phone. That's what I thought. For a long moment, she didn't speak. I could see her brain working overtime, trying to find the right words, the right angle. But there was no winning move left. The game was over. Her voice was small when she finally spoke again. What do you want? It was such a simple question. And yet, it carried the weight of everything that had happened between us. I let the silence stretch, considering my answer. What did I want? Revenge? Maybe, but not in the way she expected. A dramatic explosion, a shouting match, a screaming confrontation? No, that wasn't me. That was her game. She lived for the theatrics, for the emotion she could twist and manipulate. I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. I wanted her to feel what I had felt. I wanted her to sit in the quiet, in the suffocating, inescapable truth of what she had done. I want you to pack your things, I finally said, and leave. She blinked. What? You heard me. Her jaw tightened. You're kicking me out? I tilted my head. Would you prefer I expose everything instead? She clenched her fists, her breathing shallow. For a split second, I could see the gears turning in her head again, trying to decide if she should fight back or give in. Then, finally, her shoulders slumped. Fine. She stood slowly, moving like someone who had just realized their lifeline had been cut. I'll go. I nodded. Good. She lingered for a moment, her fingers twitching at her sides, like she wanted to say something, wanted to leave me with something. A parting shot, a final word, a desperate plea. But in the end, she said nothing. She walked past me, heading toward the bedroom, and I didn't stop her. I didn't say another word, because I had already won. And she knew it. She packed in silence. No begging, no arguments, no last-minute attempts to rewrite history. She just stuffed her belongings into a suitcase, moving like someone who knew she had already lost. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. Not because I wanted to savor the moment, but because I needed to see it through. To make sure that when she walked out of this house, she wasn't coming back. The finality of it should have felt heavier. I should have been devastated, consumed by the weight of a failed marriage, of betrayal, of the wasted years. But the strangest thing happened as I stood there, watching her zip up her bags. I felt lighter. For months, I had carried around the suspicion, the doubt, the gnawing fear that I was going crazy, that I was seeing problems where there were none. But now, I saw the truth for what it was. The deception wasn't mine to hold on to anymore. It wasn't me who had broken this. It was her. Linette turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "So that's it?" she asked. I nodded. "That's it." A pause. Then she inhaled sharply, gripping the suitcase handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. She stopped herself, shaking her head. Whatever she wanted to say, she knew it wouldn't matter. Instead, she walked past me, out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and toward the front door. I followed, watching as she hesitated at the threshold. Maybe she expected me to stop her. Maybe some small, deluded part of her thought I would break down and beg her to stay. But I just reached for the door and pulled it open. She lingered for another moment, then stepped outside. The night air was crisp, carrying the quiet hum of distant traffic. I waited until she was halfway down the driveway before speaking one final time. "Goodbye, Linette." She didn't look back. The second the door shut behind me, I exhaled, leaning against it. The silence that filled the house was different now. It wasn't suffocating. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt at peace, too. I wasn't a fool anymore. I wasn't the man who had been lied to, deceived, manipulated. I was free. Free to move on, free to rebuild, free to rediscover who I was without the weight of someone else's betrayal hanging over me. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. It was the first time in months that I hadn't felt the immediate knot of stress in my stomach. No more checking her schedule. No more wondering where she was, who she was texting, what new excuse she had lined up. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and watched as the world continued moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to move forward, too.